Thanks for joining us for another tabletop review. This time in from Century's surplus corner is a 9mm Makarov, in from Bulgaria. Beautiful piece. Gonna show you what's different about this gun and where its styles, etc. came from. Tell you a little bit about the cartridge, and of course we'll field strip it and take a look inside. Coming up next on GBGuns. So before we get into this beautiful piece out of Century Arms surplus corner, a little bit of background. This guy, the Walther PPK-S, Walther PPK, PPK-S, similar design point, 380 ACP blowback with a slide that comes out by you drop the trigger guard down, bring the slide back over the top, up, forward, and off, having a fixed barrel. This is the modus operandi of the PPK series, and it was cloned quite a bit east of what became the Soviet divide. I'm just going to move this guy to the side rather than mess with it a whole bunch. And that's where these Makarovs came into play. I'll wipe this down with my shirt. Beautiful rich bluing on here. Show clear, of course. You can see it's clear. Slide locks back when empty. We have a heel magazine release for that retain your mag method of changing mags. Don't worry, there is a solution to that. And you do get a functional slide lock and release. It's a single action, double action. So our single action comes back to the wall, breaks. Double action, longer and heavier, comes straight through, and you can decock it, leave it dead on safe, or bring it back onto fire for a first shot double action, all subsequent shots being single action. Classic SADA. So this guy is constructed a lot like the Walther I just showed you, but it's in the Soviet round 9x18mm, also known as 9mm Makarov. I've got some rounds here. Not quite all the same, but close enough to show you. I'm going to zoom in so we can explain what the differences are. All three of these are technically a 9mm. If our camera will play along. On the right here is 9mm Luger, 9x19mm, meaning it's a 9mm projectile and a 19mm case length. On the left is 380, which is a 9x17. We've got roughly a 9mm projectile, 17mm case length. And you notice here, if I get these all edged up the same, that there is a slight, as in 1mm difference in case length, stepping up between all three, because 9mm Makarov is 9mm with an 18mm case. So 9mm Makarov fits dimensionally between 380 and your standard 9mm Parabellum, Luger, all of what we in the US commonly refer to as 9mm is that 9x19. The Makarov fires 9x18, a little bit shorter. The ammunition is still produced today. There are defensive and hollow point loads out there, and it is still readily available. So there's no concerns there. When you consider that 380, a lot of guns are blowback, like the Walther I just showed you. Even modern guns like the Burst of Thunder are blowback operated 380s. 9mm, usually too much for blowback. 9x18 is kind of in the middle. So you end up with a rather stiff recoil spring. It's not terrible. I'll use the serrations in the back since this gun was designed well before it was cool to grab up front. And one of the things I noticed immediately about this particular piece from Century Arms is the import marks are down here on the grip. Now these are required by law. They say who imported it, where the gun was made, yada yada yada. But it being down on the grip has left the slide nice and pretty versus my older one that I already had in my collection was imported, and the marks are right here on the slide. Kind of fouled it up. So I got this cool, the Cyrillic IK, it shows there. It's the backwards looking N is the I in Cyrillic. and all those markings, but kind of fouled the slide by putting it there and then stamping the serial again there, whereas Century has smartly kept it pretty clean. It's still really available, can still be seen, but keeps the gun pretty. This gun, by the way, has an aftermarket grip on it from Fab Defense. You notice that it gives you a little bit of protection from slide and hammer bite there, lets your hand get up higher, and there's a transfer bar here that functions as your magazine release. It actually reaches down into the mechanism on the heel. See how it moved there? And lets you have a more traditional Western, modern thumb push release instead of the heel release. Heel release, of course, concept being that you retain the magazine when you're changing. You don't want to just throw these down the ground. That was anyways the manual of arms form. So now that we've explained a little bit about where this design came from and the cartridge, let's take a look at the actual gun. Once again, I'm gonna have to wipe this thing off. The bluing on this is gorgeous. Getting that nice sheen there. In fact, you can almost see my camera, which by the way is at a 90 degrees, which means when I do this, I'm not pointing it at my face, I'm pointing it at the camera. I'm standing behind the camera looking at it 90 degrees. So coming up front to our fit, we have a little bit of play, and that's okay. Why? Because it's a fixed barrel design. So slide alignment isn't really as big of a deal. You notice we've got a nice kind of flared style bevel to the end here, not anything by modern standards. No accessory rail, of course, because, well, those weren't a thing yet. Same thing with front side serrations. The slide serrations wasn't a deal. Nice big trigger guard so you can get your potato eating fingers in there, or winter gloves, since these were designed to be shot in cold climates. We do have a little bit of a relief cut here. In fact, I can fit with my oversized hands all 3 fingers on this gun, which is one of the things that made me enjoy them, was despite it being smaller, I can get all my hands on there, or all my fingers of my hand on there. Really cool Bakelite grips in that nice Soviet red with the Soviet star. This was a Bulgarian produced piece, with some pieces having this metal treatment that gives it kind of a reddish hue. You see it's on our safety and decocker, it's on our hammer, and it's on our extractor. Coming around the back, once again we have a little bit of slide play, but that's okay because it's a fixed barrel. The sights are diminutive. You see a tiny little blade front sight post and a notch rear sight post. This notch sticks straight up, so you can rack off of a belt or table, etc. if you want to be tactical like that or need to in a defensive situation. I bet when these were designed, it was well before that was cool. They were just doing it because that was an easier way to manufacture sights. And on the right side of the gun, we see our extractor, tiny little ejection port. You'd be surprised how this gun still runs without any issues with that ejection port being so small. Now we'll field strip this thing and take a look inside the gun. As I alluded to before, field stripping is very much like the Walther PPK or the Versa Thunder 380 if you're familiar with those. We have a trigger guard that comes down, and if you just pull it straight down, it's going to find its way back in. All you want to do is lean it one direction or the other, to the left or to the right, and rest it on that ledge. We grab our slide, pull it straight back, up, and let it go forward off of the barrel. And there it is. And as you can see, this construction is just like the PPK. Now this one's a little dirty because we've done some shooting, but you can see a rather rudimentary construction. Very simple design, very reliable design, and very classic. But I was impressed with this being a surplus gun, and import just how great a shape it was in. That's one of the cool things with the surplus corner of Century Arms website. Those of you that watched my American Mosin Nagant video might be familiar with that part of Century Arms' site. But yeah, they do still have surplus guns, just like Century Arms got really their name going for, and their history. They're just not so many anymore, just because there's not a whole lot of them out there, and they're a little quieter about it. So check out the surplus page if you dig this kind of stuff. Back onto this particular gun. The recoil spring is in good shape here. There are plenty of aftermarket recoil springs. It just pulls straight off the barrel. Not a big deal. So since that spring is what's holding everything, keeping everything closed until pressures have dropped safely, if you find recoil to be a little sharp in yours, now it is a blowback gun, so of course recoil sharp in all blowback guns. All you got to do is swap on a heavier spring, or maybe even just a fresh spring. Reassembly, as you saw, I pulled the slide back over the top, let the trigger guard drop in, and we're back at it. The trigger is pretty nice. Not the cleanest. There's still some gunk and goop deep inside there, but it works and makes for a lot of fun at the range. Gives you that Cold War feel, little James Bondish. If you want to go like this, now we've got some East meets West between the 9x18 and 9x17, aka 380. That, by the way, is also why the Germans refer to 380 as 9mm Kurz. Kurz means short in German, because 380 is a short 9mm round compared to the Luger, German invention. This guy shoots the Makarov round. Plenty affordable, plenty available. It's a neat, cool piece, and for guys like myself that grew up 80s and 90s with the Cold War coming to an end, there's still a lot of lore and cool thoughts about these kinds of things. And if you watch shows like The Americans, things like that, you're bound to see some of these old guns being used by spies, etc. But it was a police and military sidearm for quite some while. This one was made in Bulgaria. Seems to be very well made. When we do our shooting impressions, we'll run a couple of different loads through it, and you'll also see both Tia and I shoot it and give our personal thoughts on this little thing. Of course, as you probably suspect, since I already have one that I've had for years, I might be a little biased towards these things. I can't help it. They're cool. So take a look at Century Arms Surplus Corner if you want to try to find more of these, or some of the retailers that they distro through. Pretty cool gun. We'll see you on the range and show you how it actually performs. Thanks for watching.